Amanda Galindo had vivid, always in the shadows of the others. For more than 20 years, job as assistant domestic, first in modest houses and then in luxury residences, where learned to move without doing noise, to understand the gestures before words, and serve without waiting gratitude. His life. It took place between schedules rigid, tasks repetitive and silent forced, but within it lived a serene strength, one dignity intact, and a special affection for Don Ernesto de la Vega, his last employer. He not only treated her with respect, but confided in her about his routines, his memories, and even his fears. The morning when Amanda died, she felt a void, strange, like if it had been a lighthouse turned off. Without knowing it still, that day would mark the beginning of a history that would change his life forever. The rain fell persistently when Amanda arrived at the De La Vega mansion. She was wearing position, his coat further old, and in his hands he held a small package wrapped in brown paper. It was the Don Ernesto's pocket watch, the same as he had ordered deliver just today. Without explaining more, he played the gate with determination, but what he found on the other side was not welcome, neither mourning, it was hostility. Elena, the deceased's niece, looked down on her with contempt. Alberto, his brother, nor not even he hid his grimace of disgust. "What are you doing, you do here?" Elena spat. Amanda barely achievement explained that he was fulfilling a request of your pattern when was interrupted by laughter, mocking, and comments humiliating. "You are not nobody. Go away by where you came." And so, in front of the guests and in the rain, Amanda was pushed. The package fell to the ground and his dignity was trampled. No one imagined that this scene would be the first step towards a truth that would tremble the foundations of that powerful family. The clock was left in the mud, but Amanda didn't duck right away. She stayed still some seconds, soaked, with the heart beating strong and throat closed because of anger contained. It was not the first time they humiliated her, but yes, the first time I felt like something was about to break by inside. Finally, he picked up a package with trembling hands. He cleaned it as he could and left without looking back. He walked through the streets, wet aimlessly, until reaching the bus stop, where he sat down to wait under the same sky that seemed cry with her. It was then when he remembered the letter that Don Ernesto had given him, delivered before dying. He carried it in his bag, still unopened. Shaking, she took it out and unfolded it. Her eyes filled with tears as she read the first lines. "If you are reading this, Amanda, is because they have made with you what I feared, but you are not alone." Inside the envelope, there was more than just words. A key, small and rusty, and an address on a piece of paper apart. Don Ernesto had prepared everything. In the letter, he explained that he anticipated that his nephews would try strip her of what she was his by right, and asked him to trust in Gonzalo Romero, her trusted lawyer. Amanda didn't fully understand what she was doing, passing, but something inside her ignited. For the first time in years, he felt he had permission to defend himself. The next day, still with swollen eyes, he showed up in Gonzalo's office, who I was already expecting it. The man, serious but friendly, explained to him that Don Ernesto had left an alternative will, legally valid, where he named her as heiress unique. "He knew who you were, Amanda, and I knew your worth." Those words didn't erase the pain, but they planted the seed of a new Amanda, one who would never return to bow your head. If any time you felt like you were invisible, this part is for you. Maybe it's time to follow the page. The will was saved in a notary independent, out of the reach of Elena and Alberto. Gonzalo explained to her that it was necessary to present it as soon as possible, but they should prepare for a reaction aggressive of the other's heirs. Amanda listened to him in silence, trying to assimilate that word, heiress, referred to she. Inside, she felt a mixture of fear, guilt, and a new flame that barely was starting to catch fire. That night, it couldn't sleep. I thought in Don Ernesto, in his voice paused, in how there was treaty, always with dignity, as if I were part of his family. I also thought in the De la Vega, in their eyes full of arrogance, and in everything that meant confront a powerful family. But when looked again, the letter, that one mixture of fear and hope, became indecision. The next day, Amanda signed the first documents that would initiate her legal process. The reaction was not long in coming. Upon learning that Amanda was claiming the inheritance, Elena mounted in cholera. He called journalists, manipulated headlines, and accused publicly to Amanda for having seduced her uncle to manipulate him in his last days. Alberto, more calculator, contacted to ancient employees to buy testimonials in against him. Social media was filled with comments cruel, many based in lies. Amanda, inexperienced in that world, it was felt overwhelmed. I didn't understand as could invent so much hatred, but she wasn't alone. Gonzalo remained firm to his side, responding with evidence, documents and serenity. And then appeared someone unexpected, Sebastian, the nephew Don Ernesto's minor. There was state estranged from his family since toward years, precisely by refuse to participate in their business's dark. When he learned what Amanda was facing, he didn't hesitate in look for her. My uncle trusted in you, and if you are ready to fight, I am too. Sebastian was the complete opposite of his cousins. Discreet, with a look honest and a past clean. There was abandoned life, luxurious toward time. I worked as architect independent and lived in a small department on the outskirts of the city. When Amanda arrived home, the first thing she noticed was he disordered cozy. Books by everywhere, flat on the walls, and a bicycle old woman next to the sofa. There, among coffee cups and photos, Don Ernesto's old wives' tales. Sebastian showed him a copy of a recording that your uncle had him sent weeks before he died. In it, the old De la Vega made it clear that his fortune was due go to whoever had it accompanied in his last years with loyalty and humanity. Amanda Galindo. I don't want that house, nor my lands, nor my shares finish in the hands of those who they never saw me as something more than a bank. That test could change it all. With that recording and the will validated through the notary, Amanda and Gonzalo filed the formal claim to have it recognized his inheritance. What followed? It was a hurricane. Elena and Alberto hired. One of the law firm's further expensive city leaked photos, manipulated Amanda, and even got the police to arrest her on trumped-up charges of forgery. They took her handcuffed in front of the cameras, and for 2 days they kept her incommunicado. He was one of the moments further dark for her. In the cell, alone, she thought in give up. But then he remembered Don Ernesto's look, the voice Gonzalo's firm, and the gesture Sebastian's silent expression as he opened the door to his house. He couldn't stop now. When finally was released, thanks to the lawyer's intervention, Amanda walked out with her head held high. Now yeah, I know what it's like to really fight, he said as he left. And that phrase became a headline in the following days. The opinion public began to divide. Some media, seeing the evidence presented by Gonzalo and the inconsistencies in the version of the De la Vega brothers, began to question the narrative official. Amanda, who was initially seen as an opportunist, began to wake up empathy. A woman simple, without resources, facing one of the family's further influential people in the country with dignity and evidence in hand. The networks were filled with messages of support, and soon a group of former employees of the mansion, fired in his most by Elena, they began to talk. One of them, it was Laura, an ancient cook Galician, that there was returned to his land after being humiliated by Alberto. Upon learning of the case, he took a train back with more than just willpower. He had recordings of conversations private among the brothers, where they made fun of Amanda and talked openly of doing it disappear. Laura's recordings were delivered directly to the judge case manager. They were clearly heard how Alberto proposed pay an inspector to incriminate to Amanda, while Eleanor was talking about cleaning he problem before the trial. That evidence caused a turn drastic in he process. The prosecution began to investigate the siblings by obstruction of justice, corruption, and threats. Amanda, meanwhile, continued living in a little Sebastian's department, reluctant to accept luxuries or prominence. "This is not a soap opera," he said. Each time someone asked him how it felt being now he's center of attention media. But by inside, he began to reconcile himself with a part of itself, same as there was remained asleep during years. Your right to be seen, respected, and protected, not for pity, but by justice. And that conviction made her walk every day with more firmness. While the case won force in the courts, Amanda became her target of attacks further direct. One night, upon returning from the supermarket, he found Sebastian's apartment door forced open and all his belongings revolts. They had not been taken, nothing of value, but his message was clear. They wanted scare her. Gonzalo recommended protection police, but Amanda refused. "I'm not going to live in fear. They've already taken me away too much in life. This time, no." Sebastian, by his part, reinforced security and began to accompany her to each hearing. In one of those routes, while they expected he'd train, she confessed to him, "Never I dreamed of wealth. I just wanted to be left alone, in peace. But now I know that it's not just because anymore me." Sebastian didn't reply, but he squeezed her hand tightly. He didn't do lack further. Days later, another blow shook her. Her old house, a dwelling humble that there was rented during years, was burned in the early morning. Amanda saw him for the news, with tears silent in a hurry by his face. He didn't have tests, but knew who were behind. Despite the pain, his answer was unexpected. He went to the place, among the ashes, and placed a photo of Don Ernesto on the rubble. "This too shall pass," he said. That image, captured by a local photographer, went viral. The woman with a serene face and back standing among the ruins, it became into a symbol. The next day, a solidarity chain was activated. Neighbors, former employers, strangers moved by his history began to send help. But Amanda didn't ask for anything. She just accepted a thing, a letter sent by a little girl called Martina, who said with letters childish, "My mom says you are brave. I want to be like you too. You when I grow up." T moved this part. Share it with someone who needs it, recover his force. That letter was left punch in the refrigerator of Sebastian's apartment during all his judicial process. Amanda looked at her each tomorrow before leaving, as if it were an invisible shield against the contempt, injustice, and tiredness. As the weeks go by, the trial turned further complex. Elena and Alberto's lawyers were trying to lengthen the deadlines, muddy the evidence, distract the judge with technicalities. But Gonzalo, meticulous and patient, continued dismantling each trap firmly. In parallel, Sebastian had achieved further documents, emails, electronics, where the siblings, they talked about how divert money from Don Ernesto's accounts and how make up company balance sheets, relatives. Those tests were key. It was no longer just a quarrel by an inheritance. It was uncovered a network of tax fraud, money laundering and manipulation accountant. Under pressure, several De La Vega partners began to move away. Investors, they withdrew funds. The press that previously protected began to publish investigations, and the family's pristine image began to crack. In one of those reports, a name appeared unexpected: Julian Navarro, a notary retired that had been part of the circle Don Ernesto's close friend. They looked for him, and at first he showed himself reluctant to speak. But when Sebastian showed him a photograph of Amanda with Ernesto in his birthday number 80, the old man broke in crying. He asked me to protect everything, but I went coward. I signed what they ordered me to. What Julian revealed after was decisive. There was not only been bribed by the brothers to hide he will legitimate, but also kept a original copy, with date, signature, and fingerprint, Don Ernesto's fingerprint. The confession was recorded with its consent and handed over to the prosecutor's office. Amanda heard it in silence, and by first time in weeks, he said a smile that was born from the depths. Julian's recording was reproduced in a special hearing. The judge, the lawyers, and the presence they heard in complete silence. As he, notary, he recounted in detail the attempts at coercion, threats and remorse that had accompanied during years. At the end of the testimony, the magistrate called for a recess. Amanda walked out into the hall without saying a word, but with her back straighter than ever. Sebastian reached her and offered her a bottle of water. "Are you okay?" he asked. She nodded, not quite, but every time further close. That one late. Upon leaving the court, a small crowd awaited her with applause. Some they held signs reading, "Justice for Amanda," and others simply they raised a thumb in sign of respect. Amanda was not there accustomed to the attention, but nor did she shy away from it. She walked among them with humility, thanking them with her eyes. Each anonymous face reminded her that she was not fighting alone. Days later, the prosecutors. Formal charges were filed against Elena and Alberto for forgery of documents, property fraud, and attempted murder. The charge was serious, and the defense tried to negotiate a deal. But Amanda, after consulting with Gonzalo and Sebastian, refused flatly. "If I accept a deal, I continue being the employee who can buy, and I'm not that anymore, woman." The phrase was cited by all the media the next day. Meanwhile, the De La Vega mansion was intervened by court order, and many of its assets were left seized. Amanda didn't celebrate. She just watched the news. From her Sebastian's sofa, in silence, I remembered each corner of that house. The kitchen where washed dishes, the garden that watered in the early mornings, the dispatch where Don Ernesto used to read in voice high. All of that now was hers, but she didn't feel it yet, as such. Still, the truth was missing bliss in voice high, before a judge, and in front of those who they tried destroy it. The day of judgment arrived with a grey sky and a breeze sharp. Amanda dressed in the only new thing she had, a blouse white that Sebastian had given weeks back. She looked simple, but she is strong, he had said, without knowing that it also described she. Upon entering in the room, the murmur of the presence went out. Elena and Alberto were there, accompanied by their lawyers, with faces tense and avoiding glances cross paths with Amanda's. The judge reviewed all the documents, evidence, audio-visuals, testimonies and irregularities discovered. Each word was like a slab falling about the De La Vega brothers. When arrived, Amanda's turn to speak. She stood up, slowly. He took a deep breath and walked up to the podium. "I don't want to revenge," he said in a voice firm. "I just want the wishes of the person who gave me a place to be respected when nobody more did it." Amanda's testimony was brief, but full of truth. He did not speak of his pain, nor of the contempt lived, nor of the sleepless nights. He spoke of Don Ernesto, of his gestures, of how he taught him to read reports financial, although never asked him, and how he entrusted him with the key to his box strong the day he turned 60 years. "He treated me with dignity, and that dignity is all I ask for today." The judge nodded slowly. Then came the closing statements of the lawyers. The defense of the siblings tried to invalidate the evidence, but was useless. Laura's recordings, Julian's confession, Don Ernesto's voice recording, and the documents signed were irrefutable. When he judge dictated sentence, nobody, he breathed. "This court recognizes to Amanda Galindo as unique heiress legitimate of the assets of Mr. Ernesto de la Vega." Elena broke in crying. Alberto lowered his head. Amanda just closed the eyes. Like who finally you can release a weight that you carried all a life. The news toured he country in a matter of hours. The servant who defeated the millionaires headlined a local newspaper. Others media were further there. They called her symbol of justice, example of integrity, inspiration for the invisible. Amanda did not let carry by the praise. He was grateful, yes, but he didn't change his essence. He didn't move into a penthouse or began to dress brands luxurious. It was taken a week to visit his parents, grave in a cemetery humble on the outskirts of the town where they was born. He brought flowers and sat down in silence for a long time. "We did it," he whispered, and for first time in years, it was a loud cry without shame. Not because of sadness, but by he relief of having resisted without being lost in he way. Then he returned to the city with only one decision, to enter the mansion, not as victorious, but as guardian of a memory. The entrance was discreet, without cameras, neither applause. Amanda crossed the threshold of the De la Vega mansion accompanied only by Gonzalo, Sebastian, and Laura. No one else. Walked slowly by the hallways, touching the walls that so many times there was cleaned, now with free hands and heart quiet. In the Don Ernesto's office, stopped in front of the portrait of the man who had changed everything. "I did it, sir," he said in low voice. Then he went up to what sometime was his utility room and left over there his old suitcase, intact since the day of his dismissal. He didn't open it, he left it as a reminder of who was and how far there was arrived. That night, he slept in a room spacious with garden view, not for luxury, but because finally he allowed himself to do so. And when he woke up, with the first ray of sunlight, he got up with a fixed idea. That house would not be a trophy, but a place with a purpose. Amanda started the following days with a routine that many did not understand. He went through each room, each corner of the land, took note of what was needed repair, of the spaces empty and of those that were loaded with memories. He didn't hire decorators, neither renowned architects. He called to ancient workers, those who really knew the house, and offered them return with wages worthy. Some they cried when they received the call. Laura took charge of the kitchen. A gardener retired returned to care the rose bushes, and a young man who had been unfairly dismissed resumed his position as receptionist. "This isn't charity," Amanda said. "It's justice." Little by little, the mansion. It stopped being a symbol of power and became a home, a space where you could breathe respect, where each person was looked in the eye, and where decisions were made in low but firm voice. Sebastian proposed something else, to open part of the property for activities community. Amanda enthusiastically accepted. They enabled a room for literacy classes, another for sewing workshops, and the ancient greenhouse became in library public. The news attracted visits, donations, and proposals. But Amanda remained faithful to his vision. No cameras, no protagonism. When they offered him an interview on a national channel, she replied, "I'm not interested in being famous. I'm more interested in women know that you have the right to say enough." However, the echo of his history. She was already unstoppable. Universities invited her to speak. Organizations nominated her for awards, civic eye, and many women began to write letters telling your own stories battles. Amanda responded each one with simple words but sincere. Never signed as the heiress. Always signed, with respect, Amanda Galindo. If you are reading this and something moved inside you, comment here down below. We want to know. One afternoon, while Amanda was organizing papers in her office, found a notebook old with notes from Don Ernesto. There, between calculations and phrases loose, there was a message written with his letter trembling. If you read this, Amanda, it's because I trusted in you more than in nobody. Do what you think is right, fair. You know what each one is worth thing, and more still, what it does not have price. He read those words in silence and then transcribed them in a painting that he placed about his desk. That office, which during decades there was been space of secrets and decisions cold, now was breathing warmth. Amanda turned it in operations center for its new projects, free legal aid for women in vulnerable situations, scholarships for young people without resources, and a support program emotional for adults older. He did it without pretensions, without seeking recognitions. I just kept going, the instinct of someone who has known he contempt and has decided change it by opportunities. Meanwhile, the criminal trial against Elena and Alberto was moving forward. The evidence was overwhelming, and there Lawyers knew that the only thing they could do was negotiating was a reduction in sentence in exchange for cooperation. Both agreed, declared details about companies' ghost, the embezzlement and names of others implicated. Their confessions, they splashed politicians, businessmen, and even figures public. The De La Vega mansion, once a status symbol, was now the epicenter of a scandal national. But Amanda didn't let that deflect her from her purpose. They chose greed. I choose do. Something with what they left me. Gonzalo, who had been his guide from his start, proposed to him write a book about the story. Amanda thought about it a few days and answered yes, but with a condition. No drama. Let it be told truthfully so that it may be of use to whoever needs it. I don't want pity, I want wake-up dignity. The book was published under the title What I Am, Not What I Have, and it was a success unexpected, not by marketing, because Amanda didn't allow it, but by word of mouth of those who they read his history and found in she something more than one judicial chronicle, a mirror. In each chapter, Amanda narrated from simplicity further honest, how one lives being invisible to him world, how it hurts to be treated as an object dispensable, and how, even from that darkness, you can build a light. Sebastian illustrated his book with photographs of the house and the garden restored, from the letters received. By others, women. The publisher allocated part of the profits to the program's social driven by Amanda, as she demanded from the first contract, never accepted royalties personal. I already have what I need, he said. And when someone asked him by that he did not reward himself same, she answered, because I didn't fight to change my clothes. I fought to not have to hide my voice never further. One day, while organized one of the community days in he garden, Amanda saw reach a figure, unexpected, Martina, the girl who had sent that letter months ago. He accompanied her, his mother, a woman with a gaze tired but firm. We wanted to see her in person. Thank you for not giving up. Amanda crouched down to the little girl's eye level and smiled at her. You know, I saved your letter. I have it in my kitchen. Martina opened eyes, surprised. Really? Yes. He accompanied me when had fear. From that meeting, Amanda proposed create a special program for girls and boys, like Martina, workshops on self-esteem, rights and expression emotional. He called it Seeds of Voice. And although he didn't say it in voice high, in his heart knew that that little girl was one of the reasons for which he did not fall when everything was falling apart. Because sometimes courage arrives written with crayons and spelling mistakes. With the time, Seeds of Voice became in one of the initiatives most beloved in the community. Every Saturday, the mansion was filled with laughter, games, and small voices that had previously only been heard in the margins. Amanda participated actively, telling stories, teaching how to care plants, listening stories with patience infinite. Laura was preparing snacks homemade, Sebastian organized outdoor games, and even Gonzalo was encouraged to read adventure books with funny voices. In that environment, Amanda flourished. She was no longer the woman who carried the weight of the inheritance, nor the one who fought against hostile lawyers and headlines. It was simply Amanda, the one who remembered the names of all the children, the one who hugged without haste, the one who understood the value of feeling seen. That new stage did not erase his past, but transformed it into something useful, as if each wound would have been converted in a channel for others will also heal. One morning, he received a letter with no sender. It was short, written in handwriting, masculine and trembling. Sorry, I have been over there the day that they pushed in the mansion. I laughed, not because evil, but by cowardice. I saw you on TV today and cried. I wish someday I may look you in the eyes and tell you this in person. Amanda folded the letter carefully and put it away. In the same box where I had Don Ernesto's letter and Martina's. Everyone finds his moment, he murmured. Then he went out into the garden, breathed deep, and went on with his day. Never knew who had it written. But that sorry anonymous reminded him of something important. The change isn't always noisy. Sometimes arrives in silence, with an unsigned envelope, or in the look of someone who decides to do things different. And that was also part of what Don Ernesto had told him, taught that even in the act's further small hides the possibility of redemption. As they passed by the months, the mansion stopped being news and became custom. The neighbors, they no longer came to browse, but to participate. Craft fairs and concerts were organized, school children, local art exhibits. Amanda never stood at the front of the stage. She preferred be among the public, accompanying, applauding, taking care that everything went well. His leadership was silent but firm, the type of leadership that is exercised from he example. Sebastian used to say that she was like he water, without noise, but able to mold the most hard. One day, while they were sharing a coffee in the kitchen, he asked her, yeah, there was thought in fall in love again. Amanda looked at him with a smile slight. And you? Sebastian laughed, looked away, and didn't answer. But since then, the silences between them became further comfortable, more full of unsaid things, but felt. Nobody needed run. There was time. The case against the De La Vega brothers ended with a conviction firm, 15 years of imprisonment without benefit. The sentence included the restitution of property and the freezing of accounts. Elena and Alberto were transferred to prisons, different to avoid complications. During the final judgment, none wanted look to Amanda. She, for his part, the observed with a mixture of compassion and determination. He did not keep I hated, but neither I have forgotten. I did not come to destroy you, but to prevent them from continuing destroying to others. That phrase, said before the judges, remained registered in the files as part of his final statement. After the verdict, Gonzalo proposed celebrate. Amanda thought for a moment and replied, let's go to the dining room. Community. Today is the day soup Galician, and Laura tries hard when he knows we're going. So, between hot dishes, conversations, sincere and unpretentious laughter, they celebrated. Not with champagne, neither clothes expensive, but with the certainty of having done the right thing. As time went by, they began to arrive proposals further ambitious. A foundation. International wanted partner with Amanda to expand his model community to other regions of the country. Other cluster offered create a documentary series about his history. It was even proposed his candidacy for a local political office. Amanda listened each offer with respect, but also with a calm that disarmed everyone. I'm not interested, multiply spaces, if I can't ensure that they maintain his soul, he said. To the series, he replied that he preferred see the women counting their own stories, and politics responded with a smile. I chose my trench, and it is not a public office. For many, those decisions were incomprehensible. But those who they knew his route, they knew that Amanda wasn't moving by, neither by fame. His compass was another, one that pointed always towards what is just, what is simple, what is human. One Sunday in the morning, while watered the sunflowers that were there planted with the children, Amanda found Sebastian sitting on the entrance stairs with a box in the hands. It was made of wood old, with a padlock simple. I found it among Ernesto's things that were saved in his loft, he explained. Amanda carefully opened it and inside found photographs, letters and a notebook with the title Amanda, When is No Longer Here. The notebook was a kind of diary in the one that Don Ernesto was going to leaving thoughts, anecdotes and advice. In one of the first pages he said, I don't know when you will read this, but yeah, you got here. It's because you were brave. Don't you forget, never laugh. Amanda closed it with tears in eyes, hugged him against her chest, and then looked at Sebastian. I said I didn't inherit a house. I inherited a mission. And that phrase, said without drama, remained as perfect summary of everything experienced up to that moment. Following months, they brought calm down. Amanda had learned to live with it noise media, but I was grateful every day. The dawned without cameras at the door, neither calls from journalists. In that new normality, he discovered pleasures simple, cooking in silence, reading before sleeping, walking by his garden without haste. He also resumed an old custom that there was left aside by years, writing letters by hand. I did it at night, with a dim lamp on and a cup of tea. Some were for her same, others for Don Ernesto, and many for people who never I would know, but they needed words of encouragement. I signed them with ink blue, folded them carefully, and put them away in a box that he titled, "For When I Run Out of Strength." It was his way of remembering himself, same, and to others, that even in the most days, grey, there is something that remains, the dignity of continuing to stand. One day, while organized a reading workshop with teenagers, a girl approached him and asked him in low voice, "Any time you had afraid of being worthless?" Amanda looked at her tenderly and didn't respond immediately. She took a moment, sat down next to, she said, "Many times, but I learned that my worth doesn't depend on what others see. It depends on me not forgetting it." That conversation turned seed of a new program in the mansion, Roots Firm, a space for teenagers where we talked about self-esteem, relationships healthy, and life projects. The girl who asked the question, Isabel, ended up coordinating that program with the time. Amanda accompanied her in every step, without stealing from him prominence, because understood something that few understand, that the true leadership is not the one that shines, but the one who lights up to others. The mansion, which formerly housed secrets and ambition, became with the time in a space of real transformation. Each room had a purpose, each corner was full of new voices, and although the media, they no longer talked so much about Amanda, their influence grew in silence, like roots grow underground. A young lawyer, Wade, inspired by his history, left a firm prestigious to work for in his legal area of the program's community. A nurse retired, offered first workshops aid. Even a former security guard of the mansion, who had been accomplice silent about the humiliations of the De La Vega, asked return, this time to take care he placed with respect. Amanda welcomed him without rancor. While you want build, here always there will be space. So was as his legacy began to multiply, not by mandate, but by example, not by contracts, but by conviction. One morning, Amanda woke up with the news unexpected. The local government had decided name a street with its name, Paseo Amanda Galindo. They notified him by phone, inviting her to an event official. She thanked him politely, but hesitated in accept. It was Sebastian who convinced her. It's not because it's for everything you represent. So, discreetly, he showed up at the event. He didn't wear new dress nor pronounced speeches. He only went up to the small one stage and said, "Thank you, but remember that the street doesn't change lives. What changes lives is what we do. When we walked about, That phrase was left recorded on the plate commemorative. Then he walked home, as always, greeting the neighbors, loading his cloth bag with bread and vegetables, because for Amanda, the recognition was not there in a corner with its name, but in each story that achieved continue without repeating yours. With the years, Amanda aged with the same dignity with which he had vivid everything. Grey hair began to appear without trying hide them, and his steps became a little slower, but his look remained so firm as always. The children he knew in its early days workshops already were adults. Many of them formed part active of the program's community. Some called her Grandma Amanda, and although she laughed, saying that she was not that old yet, he background felt proud to see to make what was their flourish sown. Every birthday was celebrated in a mansion garden with meals shared, local music and long hugs. Never there were expensive gifts, neither decorations exuberant, only gratitude, respect, and the certainty that there no one was less than anyone else. One day, while walked among the orange trees that had standing with Sebastian, he gently took her hand. "Do you realize what you've done?" he asked. Amanda looked at him, speechless. "You've transformed a house into a home, a story of pain and a network of hope, and a name forgotten in a fighting flag." Amanda blushed, looked down, and said humbly, "I didn't do it alone." That conversation sealed something he was carrying, time beating between them. From that day on, they began to share not only projects, but also silences further intimate, sunset meals and future plans. Never they talked about marriage, neither they did promises. They only lived together with the certainty that love, like justice, does not need ads, just acts concrete. And although their lives had started in such different points, now they walked side by side, knowing that the path route had more value than any destination. Over time, some publishers they insisted in post a second part of his history. They wanted to know what there was past after the trial. As he true ending was the verdict, Amanda refused several times, until one day he understood that such time it was worth it count not him. Outcome, but what came after? Life. So was born his second book, titled After the Noise, where recounted the small one's victories that don't come out in the newspapers. One, a girl who learns to say no firmly, an old man who smiles again after years of loneliness, a mother who finds support without being judged. The book was still further read than the first one, maybe because in there was no drama but true every day. Amanda wrote it by hand with phrases simple and profound. At the end of the prologue, he noted a single line: "Justice is not always scream, sometimes just breathe." The publication of the book coincided with the 10th anniversary of Don Ernesto's death. Amanda organized a ceremony intimate in his garden, under the tree where he used to sit down to read. There was no speeches, neither protocols, only one chair empty, a lit candle and a notebook where each assistant wrote a word that represented what Ernesto had told them left. Amanda wrote, "And istasti stars." Trust. Sebastian wrote, "Courage." Laura wrote, "Second, opportunity." And the children, already teenagers, wrote words like home, protection, and light. That evening, as the sun fell, Amanda sat down in the chair, empty, and closed the eyes by some minutes. He didn't say anything, but his silence was the further eloquent of all. At that time, she was not the heiress, nor the activist, nor the figure public. It was just Amanda, a woman who, in the midst of a world that so many, sometimes he wanted her invisible, there was learned to exist with force own. After the ceremony, many stayed to chat under the dim garden lights. There was laughter, soft, memories shared, and songs that Laura hummed while was serving coffee. Amanda walked among them as who tend a fire on, making sure nothing goes out, that everything stay alive. That night, as he closed the door of the mansion, he stopped some seconds before turning off the last light. He looked around and thought, in how many versions of him had inhabited those walls? The one who cleaned in silence, the one that was cast out with contempt, the one who returned with a letter in her hand, the one who built, step by step, a home without walls, neither hierarchies. All they are me, he said to himself, in low voice, like who confirmed something that always knew, but never there was said. And with that certainty, she climbed the stairs with calm steps, ready to write a new day. In the morning next to she received a visit unexpected. He was a young man in his early 20s years, with eyes that spoke more than his mouth. He introduced himself as son of Julian Navarro, the notary who had confessed the truth years back. "My father died just a few months," he said, "but before that he asked me to come see you. He told me about you until his last day. He told me that thanks to you, died in peace." Amanda invited him in, made 2 cups of tea and listened attentively. In the young man, he took out of his backpack a notebook with notes from his father. Among them, a phrase underlined, "When one tells the truth, even if, afternoon, the soul lightens." Amanda lovingly put the notebook away and responded with a soft smile. "Then let him continue you with that task. Tell the truth, even if late." And so, without knowing it, he sowed in other heart a new seed of consciousness. As time went by, Amanda began to delegate further tasks. Not by tiredness, but because understood that the legacy should not have depended on a single person. He formed a council community compound by young people, adults and seniors who represented different sectors. Each decision important was passing by them, and Amanda participated only as a more. "The mansion is not mine," he repeated. "I only got it. Open the door." Under that new structure, the programs grew up with more strength and autonomy. Some youths created technology, projects educational, others developed support networks psychological among peers. Isabel, that teenager who at a time asked, was worth something, now it was a woman formed in psychology, leader of several teams and a reference for many girls. Amanda looked at her with pride, discreet, without needing to say, "I helped her," because in his world, the another's achievement was also the reflection of a community that works. One day, during a school visit to the mansion, a girl asked, and him, sometime there, had afraid of being poor again. Amanda crouched down to be at his side, height, and said naturally, "Poverty is not in what you do not have, but in what you don't share." Then he took her hand and led her to the library. There, he showed her a bookshelf with books donated by people of different backgrounds, places. "Each of these books arrive here because someone decided share. See, nothing is missing here." The girl, he smiled, and Amanda knew that there was also seed fallen on fertile ground. That was his way of educating, with examples, with gestures, with truths simple, said without haste. "Because I understood that you don't change a world whole at once, but yes, it transforms someone's world, a conversation at a time." One winter afternoon, while organized some files ancient in the office, Amanda found a box forgotten in at the bottom of a closet. Inside, there were letters that had never there was open. Congratulations by judgment cattle, invitations to events that never accepted, and in particular that called his attention. It was written with an elegant calligraphy and wore the name of a woman, Teresa de la Vega. Amanda didn't remember her, but when she read the content, understood everything. Teresa was a distant cousin of Ernesto, who had cut ties with the family years before for disagreements ethics. In the letter, Teresa congratulated to Amanda and expressed his hope that someone decent, finally, return honor to the family name. It was a sincere letter, without flattery, empty, which spoke of justice, dignity, and gratitude. Amanda kept it among her documents further important and thought, even in the branches further distant, there are flowers. Shortly after, Amanda decided, write his last letter to Don Ernesto. Not to tell him what had happened done, but to thank him for what he saw in she when nobody more he did. He wrote it calmly by hand, like used to do at its best moments of reflection. In the letter, he spoke to her about each program, of each new face that inhabited the mansion, of Sebastian and the dinners at sunset, of the laughter of the children and the silence that now had taste of peace. He signed it with affection, sealed it and placed it in a small wooden box that he buried under the tree in the garden, next to a plaque that said, "Here flourished everything you sowed." He did not do ceremony. He just sat down some minutes under the shade of the tree and closed the eyes. And in that simple gesture, Amanda sealed his chapter with the same humility with which he had done it begun, recognizing that nothing valuable is built alone. From that day on, Amanda began to dedicate further time itself same. She didn't stop working nor to accompany the projects, but learned to give himself gifts, breaks, reading afternoons in his armchair favorite, hikes slow by his garden, visits, spontaneous visits to the neighborhood bakery. Some, they said that it was withdrawing, but those who knew her, they knew the truth. Amanda wasn't retiring. She was choosing breathe further deep. Even began to write small memoirs personal than ever thought publish. "Not so that others would read me," he said, "but so that I wouldn't forget myself." In those pages, he was talking about his childhood, of his mother, of the silences that hurt so much, and the times he thought he wouldn't get out forward. He also spoke of Ernesto, but not from the inheritance, but from the affection, of how, without great gestures, he returned the right to exist fully. One night, while the sky was filled with stars, Amanda and Sebastian sat down in the wooden bench in front of the rosebush that together had sown. He took her hand and asked her in low voice, "Is there anything still missing?" Amanda stayed thinking, looking at the dim lights of the mansion lit in the distance. "No, but if life gives me further time, I want to use it to accompany to others to discover his voice, like I discovered mine." Sebastian smiled and kissed her on the forehead, and they stayed in silence, listening the distant chirping of a cricket. They did not lack promises, neither big plans, just being, because Amanda had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love and justice was simply remain. And that night, under that sky calm, they both knew that he didn't do it. Nothing else is missing. To feel at home. They passed the years, and Amanda continued being a silent beacon for many. Although his figure no longer filled headlines, your history continued beating in each community corner. A mural with his face, painted by youth's artists in a wall of the neighborhood, became at the meeting point and a symbol of resistance. Every now and then, someone left a flower, a letter, or a small stone with words written on it. Amanda used to pass by there on the way to the market and, seeing those gestures, bowed his head in gratitude, never allowed it to be built a statue. "Statues don't listen," he said. "I prefer continue walking among you." And he did so, with a slow but constant, with the same serene look that sometime he faced a room full of judges without bowing his head. One spring morning, while watering the plants, Amanda felt a stitch mild in her chest. It wasn't a sharp pain, but enough to make it stop. Sebastian took her to the doctor, and after several studies, they told him that he should reduce his rhythm. "The body also asks for truce," he said, the doctor. Amanda accepted it calmly. She reduced her hours, delegated further responsibilities, and began to give small talks, just one time by week. To each meeting was wearing his notebook, his glasses, and a smile sincere. She didn't talk about her history as heroine, but as a woman who learned, through blows and hugs, not to disappear. "I'm not special," she said. "I just learned not to let them erase me." That phrase was left recorded in the memory of those who listened to it, especially the most young people who saw in she is not a myth, but a real, living, present guide. Because Amanda never needed a pedestal. His greatness was in the ground he was walking on. The mansion's garden was flourishing more than ever. Every season brought colors different, and the children, who were no longer children, continued running. Between the trails, playing, learning, dreaming. Amanda used to feel in the stone bench next to the lemon tree, watching all with one peace that once seemed to him impossible. There was learned to live without haste, to value the silences, to embrace the imperfect. When someone asked him, sometime thought in leave all back, he responded with humor. Of course, many times. But something always stopped me, the certainty that if I was leaving, something was going off. And it was. True, Amanda was the invisible thread that wove to that community diverse. The heart discreet that he maintained, he pulse of everything there, it happened. And although it no longer loaded boxes, neither directed meetings, his mere presence was enough for everything continue in balance. One afternoon, he received a visit from an elderly woman, similar, elegant and serene, who presented herself like Antonia, a social worker from another city. "I don't come by curiosity," she said. "I've come to learn." Amanda invited her in, served her coffee, and listened attentively to her questions. Antonia wanted replicate he model of the mansion in his community, but I didn't know by where begin. Amanda smiled and said, "Start by listen. People, he always says what he needs, only sometimes he doesn't say it with words." He showed her as had started with a kitchen, then with a library, then with workshops. There was no master plan, just will and listening. As they said goodbye, Antonia hugged her tightly and said, You just saved me 10 years of theory. Amanda laughed and replied, just don't forget that it's not what you do that's important. It's how you do it. You look at who needs it. And with that, he dismissed her, as who turns on another candle without extinguishing his own. With the years, many they tried define to Amanda with titles, activist, leader community, heroine silent. But she would always shrug and say, I'm just Amanda. Not out of false humility, but because really, I believed that everything there was made could do it if it was given to him a chance fair. That way of thinking was reflected in each corner of the mansion. There was none hierarchies rigid, nor offices closed, nor protocols unbreakable. Everything worked on the basis of trust, and I respect mutual. Even the further youths, they knew that their ideas were worth as much as anyone else's. Adult, Amanda became, without intending to, a symbol of a different way of living in community. Not since he welfare, but from responsibility, not from charity, but from justice. One day, in an interview for a local radio station, one of the few that accepted in those years old, the driver asked him, which there was been he moment further difficult of your life? Amanda saved silence some seconds, took a deep breath and replied, the day I believed what others, they said I was. That phrase, it spread like lightning across the networks. Many shared their own experiences, their moments of invisibility, their struggles internal by recover personal value. Amanda, upon learning this, simply said, if that helped to someone, it was worth it, because never looked for likes, nor viral, nor fame. I just wanted his voice, sometime denied, would serve so that others they would find theirs. And he was. Achieving, not with speeches grandiloquent, neither campaigns massive, but with each gesture, each look, each a story that was encouraged to continue thanks to yours. One morning, Amanda received a letter from the Ministry of Culture informing him that he would receive recognition national by his social contribution. It was one of the awards further important in the country. They offered him trip, ceremony, and a speech forehead to authorities and press. Amanda read the letter in silence. He left her on the table and continued sweeping the hallway. It wasn't indifference, it was consistency. Later, he called the number indicated and thanked him politely, but requested that in place to deliver it a medal, that budget will be allocated to rural libraries. The official who attended to her was left puzzled. But madam, the country needs honor her. Amanda smiled and replied, then honor what matters to me. Days later, he received a second letter, written by hand, informing him that he had been compliment his wish. 3 libraries would take his name. That night, Amanda slept calm down because he true. The reward was knowing that even could serve. Meanwhile, life in the mansion continued. The collective lunches of the Friday they returned tradition. Every week, someone different cooked for everyone, and Amanda, although he was no longer in front, he always sat among the further young people. He listened, laughed, sometimes just watched. One afternoon, an 8-year-old boy, he approached him with a drawing in the one that appeared Sebastian, a huge tree and many children to there around. Is this your family? Amanda asked tenderly. The child, he shook his head. No, it's your garden, because you take care people as ye were plants. Amanda couldn't prevent them from getting watery the eyes. He kept that drawing with his memories further dear ones. And in his interior, he understood that there was no mission, been only inherited a house or resist a injustice. His mission there was been teach to flourish. Even where before there was only shadow, inspired this transformation. Maybe someone you know might also need to read this. Share it with someone who needs it. Recover his force. As time went by, Sebastian began to record in photographs the moment's daily life of the mansion. Hands kneading bread, faces attentive during a reading, the smiles at the end of a class. His intention was not artistic, but testimonial. I want that when we are no longer here. Don't forget this, he told her. to Amanda. Together, they selected the images further significant and created an exposure itinerant called Faces of Hope. The exhibition toured schools, centers, cultural, and even prisons, awakening emotions deep and dialogues unexpected. In each place where the exhibition arrived, Amanda sent a handwritten letter with a message simple: "You can too, to plant something beautiful. They just need fertile soil and not have it fear of time." That exhibition, without great sponsors, neither campaign's advertising, changed further lives that both of them imagined. One night, returning from one of those presentations, Amanda and Sebastian stayed chatting under the porch. He asked her, had fear that when everything that had been built was no longer there, disappear. Amanda looked at him sweetly and said, "What is born of fear falls with fear. Wind, but what is born of love casts roots." That answer was left recorded in his Sebastian's heart as the invisible promise. Since then, it was proposed to train a group of young people to learn how to care for and sustain each community corner like Amanda did. He watched with patience and pride. He didn't need supervise each detail, trusted in which the seed was planted. And in his background, I knew that the legacy true is not written in plates, neither in papers, but in the way people treat each other when nobody is looking. Autumn brought a rhythm slower. The dry leaves they carpeted, the garden paths, and Amanda used to sightseeing, wrapped in his shawl favorite, accompanied by the memories and silence serene. Sometimes, the further young people watched her from far away and said, "She looks like a queen." But I laughed when I heard it. "I am a gardener of souls," I replied. And in reality, it was. It did not impose standards, cultivated links. It did not require obedience, awoke confidence. On one of those walks, he stopped in front of the tree where there was buried the letter for Don Ernesto. He bent down with effort and stroked the earth. "Thank you for not giving up. With me," he whispered. Then he slowly sat up and continued his path, without knowing that that scene, captured by Sebastian from far away, would become in one of the photos further shared from the history of the project. Shortly after Sark, Amanda received the invitation from a university to receive an honorary doctorate in humanities, this time accepted, but with a condition, that the act will be carried out in the mansion so that everyone could participate. The university accepted, enchanted, and on the day of the ceremony, garden was filled with chairs, flowers, and excitement contained. Amanda lifted the little one upstage without speeches prepared. He just said, "Never I went to college, but I learned from every person I met on my way. If this qualification serves to inspire to others to do the good, I accept it with humility." Then he raised the diploma with trembling hands and smiled. That day, there was tears, hugs, and a certainty that floated in the air. Amanda Galindo had not only inherited a house, there was sown a different way of living, a way where justice was not punishment, but repair, where the power was not dominion, but service, and where love, finally, had lying roots. With the time, Amanda's story began to study in schools and universities. Professors of ethics, law, social work, and literature they used. His life as cross-sectional example, but more beyond the books and classrooms. What was impactful was the living experience. Young people volunteers, they arrived each month to the mansion from different parts of the country to collaborate, learn, and listen. Amanda the received with the same simplicity as always. A shared table, a conversation paused, one disarming question certainties. "For whom do you do what you do?" he used to ask, and I wasn't looking for answers heroic. But honest, because I knew that the motivation correct teaching is not born from the ego, but from the deep desire to repair, to relieve, to build. And this was taught, not with theory, but with coherence every day. One afternoon, while organized files ancient to you, Isabel found a notebook with notes, Amanda's handwritten notes. It was a record detailed ideas, phrases loose, memories important. In the first page, a title, "Just in case one day I will no longer be here." Isabel read it with respect, recognizing in each line the serene voice that had her guided from teenager. He decided, with the Amanda's consent, digitize it and create a file open so that anyone could access it, those reflections. Amanda agreed on one condition: no biography. Let people read what you think. A women common, not what the others they think I was. That file, called Amanda's Notebook, became a source of inspiration silent for thousands of people because it didn't offer formulas, only humanity. And in each page, Amanda continued teaching even without being there present. Amanda's Notebook included thought singles that played fibers deep. Never underestimate the power of one cup of tea shared. Listen without judging, it is already helping. There are wounds that only heal when someone believes in you before you do it. They were phrases born of his life, not books, and for that, they resonated. Many of those ideas began to print in postcards, notebooks and posters that decorated centers, community and classrooms in different parts of the country. But Amanda wouldn't let it impress. The important thing is not that they read me, but that they live it. Sebastian used to say that she was like a compass without the need for a north fixed, always guided the others without trying to guide them. And I had reason. Amanda accompanied processes, did not direct paths. It gave space for each who will find his step. One night, while it was raining gently and the thunder sounded in the distance, Amanda sat by the fireplace with Sebastian. He asked her, there was something she regretted. Amanda thought for a moment, took his cup and said, "Maybe there wasn't believed before in my same, but I learned that even trust can be born late and still so bear good fruit." Then he lay down in his shoulder and remained so in silence for a long time. They no longer needed talk to understand each other that night. Amanda wrote a last entry in his personal notebook. "I have lived many lives in only one. I was invisible, I was feared, I was respected, but the best was when I learned to simply be, to be without fear, to be without permission." He closed a notebook. He put it away in his shelf and went to sleep with one piece so deep that when you saw it, it seemed that even the house was breathing further slowly. The next day, Amanda woke up early, like always. He walked by He Garden, greeted the first volunteers who arrived and checked the shifts of activities. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But at noon, while I had lunch with Laura and some children, felt dizzy, mild. He asked permission. He got up slowly and went to his room. There he lay down gently and closed the eyes. It wasn't a dramatic farewell, not for a moment full of solemnity. It was simple, like she, as if he body, knowing that the mission was fulfilled. I decided rest. Sebastian found her minutes later with a serene expression and a letter about he chest. On it, written in letters firm, Amanda had left a last note. "Thank you for walk with me. Follow sowing. Keep going caring. The seed does not die. Someone waters it with love." The news of his departure toured the city with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. There was no traditional funeral. Following his will, a meeting was organized in He Garden, where every person who wanted could share a story, a song, or a memory. For hours, broken voices, laughter, anecdotes were heard that spoke of a life shared, not one figure unattainable. The children, they hung up drawings in the trees. Isabel read fragments of Amanda's notebook. Sebastian did not speak, but placed Amanda's personal notebook in a wooden box next to the tree where she there was buried his letter to Ernesto. The mansion, that late, he did not cry in silence. It vibrated with life, because Amanda had not gone, had been expanded in each gesture, in each corner, in every person who ever time was touched by his history. And so, without monuments, neither speeches grandiloquent, Amanda Galindo's eternity began. In the following days, the mansion continuous his routine. There was no pause, because Amanda had taught that life continues, always, although hurts. Laura came back to light the stoves, Isabel returned to her workshops, and the young people of the council took seriously the responsibility of sustaining a legacy. But there was something changed. Every gesture was wearing with him an intention further conscious. It was like, yeah, all they will walk a little further slowly. They will look more in the eyes. They will listen more. Attention. Amanda was no longer there, physically, but his way of being continued inhabiting the hallways, the garden benches, the notebooks on the tables. One morning, while sweeping the entrance, a new volunteer asked Sebastian, "And you? Who is here?" He smiled and replied, "I'm just someone who was lucky enough to learn to look the world through Amanda's eyes." They passed the months, and it was celebrated the first anniversary of his game with an open day that included activities for all ages. There was music, poetry, gardening workshops, and reading, collective and a ceremony, intimate gathering under the usual tree. As evening fell, a new space in the mansion was inaugurated, the Amanda Shelter, a listening room active for people in situation of vulnerability emotional. It was not an office, nor a place for diagnoses. It was a corner of trust, where someone always was ready to listen without interrupting. At the door, a phrase carved in wood, he said, "Here you listen with your soul." It was the idea of the teenagers, who they understood that the greatest power Amanda had was her ability to feel each person as if it were the only one in he world. And that did more than any inheritance. It was the greatest gift valuable that had been given to them left. The Amanda Shelter soon became in one of the spaces further crowded mansion, not for fashion, but because filled a void that many they were wearing inside. People of different ages, they came over there in looking for a word, a pause, a breath. Some just wanted feel in silence. Others, they shared memories, fears, dreams. No one was rushed, no one was judged. And although Amanda was no longer there to greet them with a cup of tea, your spirit was felt in each detail, in the hand-woven blankets, in the books underlined, in the little signs that said, "You are safe here." Isabel coordinated her space with the same delicacy that there was learned from his mentor, and many sometimes, when closing the room at night, he would stay looking the wooden sign and murmured, "Thanks, Amanda, for teaching us to be uninvaded, help without imposing, love without noise." Meanwhile, the seeds that Amanda had sown followed germinating in others' places. Antonia, that one social worker who once visited her, he replied he modeled in his city with great success. Since there, they emerged new initiatives in neighboring towns. In a few years, what began as an inherited house became in a national network of spaces, community self-managed, all inspired in the Amanda's principles: respect, listening, dignity. But no place was wearing his face like banner. It was a part of the agreement. "We are not a Amanda's franchise," he said to Antonia once. "We are branches of the same tree." And so went. Amanda turned around root, invisible to the eyes, but present in each flower, in each fruit, in every shadow that sheltered to someone who sometime he thought he was alone. Because if there was something demonstrated his life, was that a single person, when he decides to resist with love, can transform he world whole. With the second anniversary of his departure approaching, the young people of the council community organized a special activity. They invited all the people who ever time had been impacted by Amanda to send a letter telling, as there was changed his life. In a nutshell, weeks arrived more than 1,000 envelopes from different corners of the country, and some even from he foreigner. There were letters from alumni, volunteers, single mothers, the elderly, children, workers social, teaching, and even judges and lawyers who participated in his trial. Each letter was read in voice high during a day that lasted a whole day. Some they started tears, others smiles, but all of them they had something in common. The recognition sincere that Amanda had left a brand indelible, not with power, not with money, but with presence, real presence. with that non-imposing presence, with that restorative gaze, with that embracing silence. After the reading, the cards were saved in a time capsule that was buried in a garden next to the lemon tree, Amanda's favorite. "We'll open it within 20 years, said Sebastian excitedly, and although some they doubted being present by then, all they felt that something it was revealed, that Amanda, in some way, would follow over there when the capsule opened. That night, in a meeting intimate, Laura proposed something unexpected. "We should make a book with those letters, so they don't get lost." Isabel took the idea with enthusiasm, and in a few months old, he was born a new construction site collective titled Letters to Amanda. It was not a tribute solemn, but a lively conversation. Each page contained a voice different, a fragment of life, a sincere testimony. And so, Amanda was told again not for what she did, but for what it caused in the others. Because in the end, your history wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone. Letters to Amanda became in a phenomenon unexpected. People who never met her, they started to approach the mansion just to sit down in his garden, read a chapter of the book under the lemon tree, or leave a letter of his own in the small wooden urn installed next to the tree. They were not tourists. They were seekers of meaning. Many said they felt something special when they were there. Like he air-breathed different, like if something that wrapped with tenderness. Isabel, who assumed each time further leadership in the community, I used to say, "This place isn't magical, it's just full of truth," and perhaps had reason, because everything Amanda had left was made of simple and sustained acts, listening, caring, respecting. But when those gestures multiply and become everyday, they build something more stronger than any speech. They build belonging, and in the mansion, everyone knew they belonged. Sebastian, by his part, decided post a last series of photographs unpublished, taken in the last Amanda's years. I wasn't looking for portray her as icon, but like the woman every day that always was, in a bathrobe, watering plants, dozing with a book about her chest, smiling in silence while peeled lemons. The series was called Amanda, simply, and was displayed a unique time in the same room where she used to organize the writing workshops. The sample did not have opening speeches, neither rug read, just a table with tea, homemade cookies, and a notebook where the visitors could write what they felt. At the end of the day, that notebook was full. Some they wrote poems, others thanks. A child let drawn a heart with the word home on it he sent her, and everyone left with the feeling of having shared something intimate, authentic, non-transferable. Because Amanda, even in his absence, continued making people feel seen. One day, a young journalist, newly graduated, he arrived at the mansion with the intention of writing an article about the Amanda Galindo's legacy. He asked interviews, access to files, data, chronological. Sebastian greeted her kindly, but said something that disconcerted her. "We don't file anything here, his legacy. We live it here." The journalist decided stay a week. He participated in the workshops, served lunches, talked with children and adults, listened more than he asked. In the end, he didn't write an article. He wrote a letter. He left it in the wooden urn next to the lemon tree. It read, "I came looking for a history. I'm leaving with a different way of seeing a world. Thank you for teaching me without speaking to me directly. Amanda did it other time." And so, another voice joined in to that choir silent that followed, growing without the need for stages, neither applause. With the time, the mansion stopped being known only for his history. It became in a reference by his management model community, by his ability to include without indoctrinating, by his firmness without harshness. Institutions, academics, organizations, social, and governments began to study it as a replicable example. But those who lived over there, they knew that the secret was not in a manual. It was in the way of relating, in the trust woven day after day, in the humility of correcting oneself, in the joy of sharing. Isabel, now already converted in one of the most voices firm of the place. He summarized all in a phrase that there was heard many Amanda's times. There is no need to do everything, just what it touches, but do it well. And so they continued without haste, without pause, walking on the traces that she left, but also opening paths new, knowing that honor Amanda was not about imitating her, but continue his drive with authenticity. Every year, in the anniversary of his arrival at the mansion, not of his death, but of that first day in the rain, with the package in the hands, the community organized a hike symbolic from the train station to the entrance of the house. It was not a procession, not even an act solemn. It was a hike in silence, where each person carried something small that represented what Amanda had told them. Taught, one flower, a letter, a stone, painted, a notebook. Upon arrival, they left those objects in a circle under the lemon tree, and then a breakfast was shared community in a garden. It was a way to remember that the true beginning was not heed judgment, not the inheritance, but that moment in which one woman, despised by many, chose not to give by defeated. That moment that Amanda decided stay, still when all it seemed, invite her to leave. Once, during one of those walks, one little girl who didn't know the story, asked in voice high, "And why that we walked? Yes, isn't he here anymore?" An older woman crouched down beside her, height and sweetly replied, "Because thanks to she, now all can walk with firm feet." And in that phrase was contained the whole essence of what Amanda had meaning. There was no need to understand it everything. Just feel it, just let go, tap for the truth of one life lived with courage. And so, without the need for elaborate words, neither tributes bombastic, Amanda's figure continued growing, not like myth, but as living part of a community that had learned to look different, to hear different, to act different. Because when someone changes their environment with love and coherence, your presence never ends. It multiplies. And Amanda Galindo was proof of that. Every day, Sebastian, with the years, he became guardian silent of history, never wanted occupy he Amanda's place, nor talk in his name, but his mere presence maintained, joined the group. He continued caring, he garden, photographing moments, sharing advice to the further young people. Every so often, he sat down in the bench in front of the lemon tree and opened he Amanda's personal notebook, the one she kept with delicacy in a wooden box. I didn't read it as Ye would search answers, but as who visit to a dear friend. She would leaf through it, smile, remember, and every time someone new came to the community and asked by Amanda, he said, "Don't look for her in the photos, look at her in as us we tried." Because Sebastian knew that Amanda hadn't left instructions, but example. He did not leave rules, but a way of being, and that way lived on in each decision, in every hug, in each silence shared. One afternoon, he received a visit unexpected, a young man with a familiar face who turned out to be the son of one of the ancient employees of the De La Vega family. There were grown listening versions distorted about Amanda, but with the years had been closer to the truth. "I come to ask sorry in my father's name," he said, in a voice trembling. Sebastian heard it in silence, then invited him to take a walk he garden. He showed her the library, the dining room, the listening room, the workshops. In the end, he told her, "It does not lack delete he past, just build something different about it." The young man nodded with tears in the eyes. Days later, he began to collaborate as volunteer in a maintenance area. No one looked at him with suspicion, no one asked him explanations, because in the mansion, as Amanda had taught, always there was place for whom I'd like start over with honesty. The years passed by, and although some faces were changing, the essence remained. There was a living memory that did not need to be told all the time, because was printed in the gestures every day. New generations. They came, listened, asked questions. Some were surprised to discover that Amanda had never. He held an official position which he did not study for in universities prestigious, which he did not lead foundations millionaires. And it was then when they understood that the real impact doesn't depend on titles, but on decisions. She chose stay when all they expected him to leave. He chose talk when they expected him to be silent. He chose share when barely had for herself, Isabel said in her workshops. And that way of choosing, so human, so firm, so compassionate, was what followed, marking the rhythm of everything that was done there. One day, a group of teenagers proposed create an audio-visual archive with stories from people they met to Amanda. They wanted preserve his history, told by many voices, so that it would not be lost with the time. Sebastian and Isabel supported the idea, and for months they recorded interviews, edited videos, and compiled photographs. The result, it was a documentary titled Amanda in Us. He introduced himself in the main hall of the mansion, with chairs foldable, screen white, and a row of thermoses with coffee. There was no guests, specials, neither television cameras, only community. And during an hour and a half, everyone, they laughed, they cried, and they felt it again close. In the end, a little girl, he raised his hand and asked, "And now that we do with everything this?" Sebastian smiled and replied, "Now we live it every day." Because Amanda, more than a story to be told, it was a way of living he world, and that was his true legacy. The documentary, Amanda in We, began to circulate around schools, centers, cultural and rural communities, but not as a work that was due admire, but as an opening tool, conversations. In each place where it was projected, the equipment proposed to ask simple at the end, "What can so here?" That phrase, taken from one of the many grades Amanda's handwritten notes, became trigger of new ideas, gardens community, dialogue circles, care networks mutual. Because further beyond the figure of Amanda, what really inspired was the possibility that any place, by further small or battered as it was, could become in shelter, in school, in home. Isabel said it clearly. Amanda was not miracle. It was a choice sustained, and that idea, so devoid of mysticism, was empowering, inviting. It ignited something in people. One afternoon, while organized a reading activity in Voice High, Laura found in a box older notebook that no one I remembered. It was a collection of phrases shorts that Amanda wrote for herself, same as a reminder. "Don't forget who you were, nor not even when all tea clap. Don't you defend with hatred, that gets dirty, you truth. Those who laugh at you do not know. Don't take it personally. Some were hard, others sweet, all of them deeply honest." Isabel decided to read one by week at council meetings, and with time, those phrases became part of the identity collective of the place. They painted in murals, were embroidered in napkins, were shared in cards. I don't eat quotes famous, but like brief hugs that said, "We are with you." And so, Amanda continued present, not as a memory far away, but as a soft voice that still he walked among them, leading from his heart. With the time, Amanda's phrases crossed borders. A teacher Argentina shared them in your classroom, and your students began to write answers to each other. A therapist in Colombia used some as login group. In Spain, a woman who had survived violence domestic found in the courage to open his own support network. And so, without social networks, offices, neither marketing campaigns, Amanda's words spread, not as doctrine ought, but as seed. Sebastian, upon learning of these stories, just said she knew. That's why wrote in notebooks and not in screens, because words with roots arrive far away, even when we don't see how. And in each history shared, in each gesture repeated, Amanda seemed reaffirm his invisible presence but firm, as if, since some corner of memory, even saying, "I am here, in whatever you choose, do with what you hurts." One morning, while they watered, he gardened. Between laughter and conversations, Softy, one of the volunteers, further youths asked, yeah, sometime would put a statue of Amanda in the neighborhood's central plaza. Isabel and Sebastian looked at each other and shook their heads. Amanda asked us not to do anything that would put her by above anyone, but then they thought an alternative. With the help of local artists and neighborhood children, they built a living installation, a circle of wooden benches surrounded by plants natives, where each bank recorded one of his phrases. They called it the round. There, people sat to talk, to read, to rest. There was no center nor podium, just space shared. And that, it was perhaps the representation further Amanda's faithful, a place where all fit, where nobody shines alone, and where the value of each person is recognized without the need to raise one's voice. La Ronda became quickly in her heart symbolic of the neighborhood. The council meetings community began to be made there, like welcoming new people, volunteers, emotional farewells and celebrations simple. It was not unusual to see someone sitting alone, reading in silence, or to a group improvising a song with guitar. The energy of the place was different, each bank will keep a whisper of Amanda, every plant knew it was growing in land sacred. One day, one older woman than ever there was spoken in public asked to speak during a meeting, and with voice trembling, she said, "Never I met to Amanda in person, but thanks to she, I learned to forgive my sister after 20 years. No one applauded. They just approached to hug her, because there, the recognition was not shouted. It was sustained in her body, in the look, in the listening attentive, in a year-end meeting. While as they shared homemade bread and tea, Isabel suggested they begin planning a community historical archive with documents, photographs, letters, and testimonies that would tell the story from inside. Not to be a museum, he clarified, but so that those who arrive understand where from we come and go where we want, continue. Sebastian offered to help with the part graphic, and the further young people were enthusiastic about the idea. They called it Living Roots. The archive would not be hidden in a silent room, but distributed by the whole mansion, in the hallways, on the doors, on the cups, on the napkins embroidered, because they knew that history is not in what is saved, but in how to use it. And each object, each written word for Amanda, he turned a compass for whom I'd like walk different. Not like she, but as same, but with the same courage. One spring day, while Sebastian was hanging new photos in one of the corridors, he found a postcard that someone there was left unsigned. It said simply, "Thank you for teach us that it does not do. You need to be strong to start. You just need to start to become strong. Strong." He held her with a pushpin golden and left it visible just in front of the dining room door. From that moment on, it became in one of the phrases further repeated by the youth's volunteers. Amanda never wrote it, but all they felt that it belonged to them, because if something represented his story, was that ability to start even with fear, to hold on even without certainties, to walk when it seemed further easy give up. And so, without meaning to, Amanda continued writing through others. He continued inspiring decisions, words, silences. It lived on in what it provoked, rather than in what it left behind. They passed the years, and many things changed. Some moved, others grew. New faces they arrived. But each true time, all were returning. To a meeting, to a lunch, to a chat in a garden. They returned as who returns home. And always, without fail, someone pronounced his name. Sometimes in voice, tall, sometimes just in a breath. Amanda Galindo was no longer just a story of justice and transformation. It was a way of looking he world. It was a language common among people who, without knowing each other, shared a root. And although nobody could fill his place because never wanted have a throne, all they felt that something about her lived in each gesture that they repeated. Because when a life touch many others with love, it becomes infinite. And Amanda, without having done. So planned, it became in something infinite, distributed in 1,000 hands, 1,000 voices, 1,000 futures that had not yet born. Every 5 years, in the anniversary of his game, was organized a day called Seed Day. It wasn't meant to be mourned, but rather to be sown. In his name, they were planted trees in schools, flowers in hospitals, orchards in dining rooms. At each site, there were briefly his history, but more than talking about his past, there was talk of what she inspired to do in the present. We did not come to remember a life. We came to multiply it, Isabel said at the beginning of each day. And so, amidst wet earth, dirty hands, and laughter shared, Amanda continued germinating. Even children who never knew her, they talked about her as if she were part of their family. Amanda says you have to share, one said. Amanda takes care of those who are sad, she said. Another, and in those simple sentences, I was everything. And because when a life becomes reference emotional, no longer needs biography, lives in his heart. In a letter written by a rural teacher from a community isolated, it read, "Thanks to Amanda, my students, they stopped thinking that their history doesn't matter." That letter was read in voice high, late in he garden, and many they cried, because they understood that Amanda's greatest achievement was not have won a trial, nor have inherited a house, nor have built a center community. It was to have changed the narrative of what was possible. It was having proven that a woman without a surname, without resources, without allies, could do to shake a system, not with violence, but with coherence. And that after resisting, it could heal. And after healing, I could share. And after sharing, I could teach. Amanda wasn't perfect. She made mistakes. She hesitated. She fell. But she got back up each time with more clarity. And that, more than any other. Merit, that's what made her unforgettable. In it, closing a forum international about leadership community, a young man who had grown in the mansion took he microphone and said, "When I was a little girl, I thought Amanda was a kind of fairy good. Today, I know that she was human, and for that is still further powerful." The room kept silence. No one needed add nothing, because in that phrase was condensed her mystery of Amanda Galindo. There was no born to be admired, but to show that it is possible live with meaning, even in the midst of injustice. That is possible transform, not from anger, but from steadfast love. That is possible say no without shouting, and that there is dignity in each gesture every day, if done with intention. Amanda never sought to be a beacon, but illuminated. Never. He sought to be a guide, but guided. Never asked voice, but his voice was left in all. In the last corners of the archive community, along with notebooks, old people, photos, faded and folded cards. Someone he found a piece of paper with a single sentence written in pencil. "If one day you forget about me, don't worry. Just do something good for yourself. Someone more." Nobody knew when Amanda wrote it, or for whom, but everyone they knew it was her. And that role, simple and almost lost among so many things, became in one of the treasures further care of the mansion, because it not only summarized his philosophy, it was also his farewell or his return. It was her way of reminding the world that love, when offered generously, doesn't disappear. It is recycled, it is renewed, it is sown. Amanda Galindo didn't leave monuments. He left roots, and as all root true, it is not seen, but holds everything that grows. With the years, many people followed wondering as someone as Amanda had achieved so much. But those who had vivid near her, they knew that the question was poorly formulated. Amanda didn't achieve things. How are they achieved trophies? She lived in a way that made it inevitable that good things would spring up in her around. His consistency was the key. He didn't do big gestures one day and disappeared the next. He was, always, listened, always, responded with respect even when they hurt her. And that was what made her transformer, your way of insisting in the good still when he world did not offer it back. Sebastian used to say that Amanda did not leave a path. She left a attitude, and by that, your story was not over never, because each person who decided act with that same dignity, he wrote a new your page legacy. In a small notebook that Sebastian kept until the end of his days, there was a last photo. Amanda watering a rosebush with the hair loose and one smile quiet. On the back, a phrase written by her same, never wanted flowers in a vase. He wanted the roots breathe. That image, that phrase, and that memory were left a symbol of a different way of living a world. Not since he noise, but from perseverance silent. Not since he me, but from he us. Amanda Galindo did not change he world with speeches. He changed it with presence. And that presence, multiplied in so many people, she was still alive. In a garden, on a shared bench, in a piece of advice she listens to before deciding, in a notebook full of phrases underlined, and about everything, in every human being who, having it known or not, he dared to look to another with humanity. Every year, new people arrived at the mansion, some by curiosity, others by need, many in the hope of finding a place different, and they found it. Because although Amanda was no longer there physically, his imprint there was left tattooed in the walls, in the trees, in the forms. Nobody needed tell them who there was been. It was enough live a day there to understand it. Generosity was not a framed value, and it was a practice. Respect was not a slogan, it was a way of speaking and listening. And the careful, it was not a rule, was a reflex. So what began as a simple promise in the rain had been turned in a community that not only resisted, it flourished. Because Amanda, by stopping fighting for what was not his, he discovered what was his, the ability to transform realities from everyday love. And so Amanda Galindo's story ended, or rather, so began to not end. Never, because while is someone who decides stay when everything tells him to leave, someone who looks at another without judgment, someone who says, IT I think, or IT I hope, or IT accompany me, Amanda will remain alive. Not in statues, neither in books, but in decisions real, in the way one sits down to share a loaf of bread, in how one welcomes a stranger, in the courage serene of whom, without having all the answers, choose not to give up. Amanda Galindo inherited a house, yes, but what he built was a lot more, one new way to belong. And in that legacy, so many found something that seemed lost, the right to be part, to stay, to flourish. As she did, if you made it this far, prove it was worth it. Share this story with someone who still doesn't believe they can to flourish.